morning. Today we are on a Princess 435, which is kind of one of my favourite boats of all time. I wanted to buy one of these many times and I never did. Would I one day? By the time I have the money, they might be a little bit old, but it's a lovely, super boat. Super boat. Love them. Olesinski hull, late 80s, early 90s, aft cabin, flybridge, dinette. Nice engines, TAM D71s possibly, looking at them. You can look at them, look, there we are. Can we see that? There's lots of tools in the way, but there's a TAM D70, I think it's a 71, I haven't actually checked yet. Anyway, what we're doing, two jobs. The owner has installed a heater, diesel heater, and the diesel feed pipe is not secured well. It's nearly touching the port shaft, so we're going to modify that, possibly shorten the pipe, certainly add some P-clips and get it out of the way. And the more important task is the port side stern glands are leaking. I'll show you those in a minute, but not from up here. So we are going to repack the stern gland. We are going to do it with the boat afloat, which is a bit scary, but not massively scary. I've done, not a 435, but I've done other boats afloat before. When you get the last packing ring out, water comes in, but it doesn't come in scary fast. Comes in enough for you to think, let's get some new packing in here before we get too much water in here, because ultimately if I walked away and left it, it would sink the boat. So it's a bit serious, but it's a job I've done before and I'm not entirely scared much. A bit, it'll be all right. So here we are. This is, for those uninitiated, a stern gland. And its very simple purpose is to prevent the water outside the boat getting inside the boat. On the other side of this, well, it was bronze, it's a bit green now, bronze fitting is the outside, in this case river, could be the sea. On the other side we have the propeller shaft, coupling a gearbox, and then a rather whacking giant great engine, which is fairly imposing when it's just here right above me. So as you can see, there's quite a little bit of a drip. Now stern glands like this, it's an old stuffing box type of stern gland, are supposed to drip whilst the engine is running. One drip every minute roughly is a good guess. The reason for that is inside here there's a couple of things. One of those things is a cutlass bearing, and it is a water lubricated cutlass bearing. So this pipe here, goodness me, this rather greeny pipe here is a water feed pipe. And it feeds water to that bearing, which then comes out the back of the boat, but a bit will come in here. However, it should not be dripping when stationary, and one drip per minute when running is sort of accepted normal. So this is dripping once every, gosh, 3 or 4 seconds stationary, so that definitely needs doing. What are we going to do? Well as the cutlass bearing inside here, there are also gland packing rings. They're made out of, well, they're made of various things. The current trend is to use graphite ones. I don't actually like them. The old ones are a flax type rope, and within there, we'll take it apart in a minute. You take this collar off, 2 bolts there, studs with nuts on. Remove this collar, and behind there will be, should be 3, sometimes there's 4, shouldn't be 2, that's not enough. So we should have at least 3 rings. So what I need to do, I don't know what size material they are, so we're going to pull the collar off, we're going to pull one of the rings out, we're going to measure it, and we are then going to reassemble everything and go for a little drive to the chandlery and pick up some new packing material. Then once we come back, what we'll do is we will cut them to size before we start. We will wrap them around this shaft, or it'll be one length. We will wrap that one length around the shaft, and then we'll cut it with scarf joints, 3 of those rings, and we'll have them ready, because when we take the last ring out, the river is going to come in through there. So hopefully not scarily fast, but it will definitely come in. So the idea is to have the rings ready to put straight back into that hole, so we minimise the amount of river that we get inside the boat, because of course the river is supposed to stay outside the boat. And this is that diesel line. It's not secured appropriately, so we will, I'm not sure whether we're going to shorten it or just clip it up yet. It's worth noting that this pump here has to be inclined at this angle for it to work, so we need the drop at the bottom before the filter, but I want to lift the whole thing. It's rather close to the shaft, so we're going to We need to leave the pump where it is at that angle, but we need to work out whether we're going to shorten maybe this end or move it up and secure it. We'll worry about that in a bit. First thing to do is get this packing material out so we can see what we need to get. I've done things in a slightly different order. I was going to start with this, but of course this fuel line was getting in the way a little bit, and seeing as we had to move it anyway, then I thought, well, we'll just start with that. So it's always the way the owner says, oh, 5-minute job, can you just move that for me? Yeah, it's never a 5-minute job though, so we have had to remove the gear cable. It's this fella just here, goes onto this fitting here. We've had to remove this intake silencer for the heater. I've had to cut a few cable ties off, and it's to get access really to where I want it to go. So what we've done, we've put a new little P-clip in down here, and I have bent the pipe. It's a lovely copper pipe, which is really easy to bend by hand. You have to be a bit careful you don't kink it, of course. Bend at the bottom. It now comes up here. The important thing is to make sure there's a nice clearance between that pipe and the other pipes, because I don't want them chafing against each other. So a little bend in there to keep it clear of that fuel pipe. Comes up, we've used it in an existing fitting, that green thing that was empty. Why they didn't use that in the first place, why? It was there, empty, just use it. And then the pipe comes up around, and we've raised it just a little bit at the top here. So we've now got nice clean bends. We've used an existing fitting here. We've used an existing P-clip down here, which we've relocated. So, and we've brought the whole thing up, as you can see, quite significantly. Lots of clearance there. We've maintained that angle on the intake pipe there to the pump, so the pump always has a nice positive draw. We've used no consumables. I've only used parts that were here already, just repositioned them. Okay, I'm going to use a couple of cable ties just to resecure this grey conduit and a few bits and pieces and put things back together, but it was just, yeah, it's almost just laziness. Why was it not secure? I mean, it was just dangling, and I've not had to buy anything. Existing parts just moved around a bit, and we've now got a nice run. Anyway, I shall now cable tie those back on, put the gear select cable back on, put this intake silencer back on, and it's all back together in, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour maybe. Easy. Right here then, folks, there it is. That's the collar which you've removed. This is after I've cleaned it with a wire brush. It was looking a bit manky. It has obviously been dripping for a very long time. I'll give that another clean before we put it back together, but had a bit of a clean. Right, so that is your packing material just there. That kind of brown looking stuff between the shaft and the casting itself. So that is the stuff we are going to replace. So the question, of course, is how do we get the old stuff out? There are two methods. I have tooling for both. The first is special tool number one, a hooky thing, which actually broke. I've had to, I've araldited it back together. So the hooky thing, you can ping it into this stuff. It's a flaxy or graphite impregnated rope type thing. I'm not entirely sure the actual composition, but it's fairly soft. So you can hook it, which is a good way of doing things. The other way, if you haven't got a hook and works in some circumstances, may even be the one we're going to use today, and I'll tell you why in a second, is self-tapping screw. You very simply screw the screw into the material. You do two, one either side, and then two pairs of pliers, one either side, and you just pull it out. Now this is quite large packing. I'm guessing it's probably 3/8 inch or 10 mil. They go down 5/16, which is 8 mil or 1/4 inch maybe. The nice thing about it being slightly bigger is it means I can actually get the screws in there and get a good purchase. And although the hooky tool is a tool designed for getting this stuff out, actually sometimes it's easier with the screws, because you can do one either side and you can pull it out as one ring. The hook tends to destroy it as it comes out. So we will, I think we'll go with the screws first. Take that first ring out. There should be 3 in there. And we'll measure it up to be sure, and then we'll put the collar back in. I'm not going to leave the boat in pieces like this. Just loosely put it all back together, and we'll go for a drive and get some more. I went for the 2 screw method, and entirely inadvertently I managed to put the second screw actually right in where the scarf joint was. I didn't realise that till I pulled it apart. So what happened was it the ring isn't snapped, it is just one piece, and it has a scarf joint here, and I managed to put the screw in the scarf joint. When I pulled it, it just pulled the joint apart, but quite nicely. I don't know if you can see, but actually it lifted this edge as well, so there was a bit to grab onto. Very straightforward to come out. One screw on one side, one screw on the other side. Pair of pliers, pull, 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 out it comes. There is the second of 3 rings. Now, interestingly, I don't know if you know this about these type of stuff in boxes, the second and third rings, we've just taken the third ring out, if you like. The first ring is up against the fitting by the hull. Don't really do much. Most of the sealing, almost all of it, is done by the first ring, so you don't get lulled into a false sense of security. We've taken a ring out and not much more water is dripping out. We will go for a drive now. What I will do is I will we'll put this back in here just to hold it all together, and put a couple of nuts on it so we don't get any surprises when we come back. But when we get the second ring out, not a lot's going to happen. When we get the first ring out, that's when we get into panic mode. I say panic mode. Water will be coming in. The technique I'll show it to you in a bit is what we'll do. We will cut the rings on and place them on the shaft. We'll use the shaft as a template, and we'll have the rings lined up here, so that when that last ring comes out, we've got the new rings ready to slide straight in against the water flow. Once you get that first one in, then that's going to stem the water significantly to a point where we can work. So that we'll have them all 3 rings lined up on here, ready to go. So the moment that we start panicking, when the water starts coming in, we will slide the ring straight back on. I've never done this on a 435 before. I've done it on a 385, I've done it on a Sealine F43, similar size shafts, similar size fittings, and yes, water comes in, but it's not kind of scary, sink the boat in 5 minutes, so it's not too bad. I'll show you that hopefully in a bit, depending on how much it comes in. Well, welcome back. I've just had a mission to try and get hold of this stuff. I didn't know, but apparently there's a shortage of stern gland packing in the UK, due no doubt to the COVID and people not being able to manufacture it or import it, so I've had to go to 4 different marinas, chandleries, and I've managed to get some 10mm 3/8 inch. It's not my preferred type. This is the graphite impregnated one rather than the flax type. I think I mentioned it earlier. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable for the job. This is what it's built to do. It's a bit messy, and you can see where we've got the drips at the bottom there, drips of water. What you'll find is in use, you'll still get a drip of water every minute, as we say, but this stuff will then leach out some of that graphite, and you'll end up with a puddle of kind of blacky, horrible, gunky mess at the bottom of there after it's been run for a while. But it will certainly do the job that we are intending it to do. So the setup is thus. That ring's going to fall off. There it goes. Bye. So we had a ring there. It's now on the floor. When we remove these remaining 2 rings, that ring that's on the floor will be ready to push straight in behind the faceplate of it there. And the reason for that is if the water does come in faster than I would like, I've got something that I can just shove straight in there to stem the flow of the water. Once we've got the first one in and tight, and we will use this backing plate, we'll screw down on that and use it to force it all the way in tight. We can then take the plate back out, and we've got 2 more rings there ready to go. So there'll be 3 in total. The way they are cut, we use something called a scarf joint, so it's a 45-degree cut. There'll be one on the other side, and the reason for that is, of course, one end kind of overlaps the other, so that will help to prevent any water ingress. It's done that way so that when we add pressure from this, it will force the 2 halves together. And when we put the 3 rings in, there's another important thing we should do, and that is to stagger those scarf joints. There's 3 of them, so we'll do 120 degrees. We'll put, hopefully the first ring, we'll put the joint at the top, but it will depend how quickly the water's coming in, just as long as we get something in. Then the next one will go 120 degrees around from that, and the third one will go another 120 degrees around from that. And that means that all 3 joints are staggered. You don't want to have joints aligned with each other. I mean, I'm not expecting any leaks to occur through the joints, but if it did, you've then immediately got behind it another solid piece of ring. So it's important that we stagger those 3 joints. So I'll put that one back on, and we'll get ready to pull out those remaining bits of packing and see how much water comes in. I would like to be able to video that, but if it does come in faster than I would want, then obviously I'm going to be a bit rushed to get the first ring back in, so we may not be able to get any footage of that. We'll see what happens. So unfortunately I chickened out. It wasn't super scary fast, but it was pretty much, it was a bit of a gush, yes. So we've got the first ring just wedged in. It's not put in properly by any stretch of imagination, it's just wedged in. One of the tricks to this is to get that outer circumference into the lip first, because if you try and do up the collar without those edges in, it will pinch on the edge. So we've got the first ring in, and you can see we've still got a bit of a dribble. I mean, you know, it's a dribble, but when I took that last ring out, it was enough for me to think, you know what, let's get on with this rather than messing around with video cameras. So we'll get that bedded down and put the other two in. Well, here we are with two of the rings in, just two, and the leak, as you can see, has already stopped. Still a third ring to go, sitting up here ready to go back in once we take the collar off. And then when we do that, we're going to kind of bed in the packing as well. So we'll do up these two nuts nice and tight. They're not, I mean, they're not finger tight now, but they're not very tight. They're just compressing the packing, and when we get the third one in, we'll get them up nice and tight. And what that will do is it'll really squash the packing in, and it will fill any voids, any imperfections in the casting of the stern gland, anything, any marks or scratches on the shaft. And then we'll back off again till we get a drip, and then nip it back up until the drip stops. Now, can I put my torch somewhere like this? The other important thing to do is to check that the shaft still turns. I can't do it by hand. I did it just now. There we go. Yeah. So the shaft still turns with minimal resistance. I say minimal resistance. You've got a 24-inch prop on the end of this and an engine on the front of it. So there's some resistance inherent, but it's not binding in here. So once we've done that, it's important to note actually that when you do these things up, you do a bit on the top and a bit on the bottom and a bit on the top and a bit on the bottom, so they go in straight. And then we'll just check that the gap at the top and at the bottom are the same when we are finished, to make sure that the whole thing is in there nice and straight, but not a single drip in all this time that I've been talking. So good, we'll put the third one back in, and away we go. So there we have it. There is the repacked stern gland. Got the lock nuts back on top there as well. We have a minor issue in that the owner hasn't left the engine start keys here, so I would like to have run the engines and put it in gear, run the engine, put it in gear and just seen how much of a drip. We would like 1 drip a minute. So the tension I've got on it, you can just see a tiny weep coming around there. So that should be enough, I think, to allow that little bit of weep that we should get when the engine is running. I can do the nuts up more, but I'm loath to go too tight, because of course if you don't get that bit of water lubrication coming through, then you run the risk of the stern gland getting hot, which we do not want. That's why it's water lubricated, we don't want it getting hot. So that's all good, I'm happy with that. I have measured the gap, top and bottom. It's 14.5mm at the top and it's about 15mm at the bottom, so there's half a mil difference between the top and the bottom. It's in there fairly tight, and again, you know, we need a bit of a drip at some point, so I'm happy to leave half a mil difference between top and bottom. That's not too bad. It needs to be pretty much parallel, so that is pretty much parallel, half a mil out. That's all we can do for the moment. I will talk to the owner and just let him know that monitor it. If it does weep again, we can nip it up a bit. If it doesn't weep when the engine's running, we can loosen it off just a little bit. But the important thing is, at the moment, we are now no longer sinking. I mean, you weren't really sinking anyway, but any time water is coming into a boat, then technically you are sinking. So there's nothing at all dripping off the bottom there, which is what we want. So good job, happy with that. Got the fuel hose nicely clipped up out of the way as well, so it's no longer in any risk of touching a rotating shaft, which it was at the beginning. So all good, happy with that. See you next time.